Good day, everybody. Coach Troy Brown here. You probably know who I am, right? I'm sending this particular webinar to you. Basically, first of all, I want to tell you something. I'm very new at this, so I might be a little bit choppy, but the goal is to help you. The goal is to give you more tools in your toolbox. The goal is to help you when things flatline, when your muscle building endeavors completely are what we call linear, right? They have this sort of plateau, if you will. I want you to go back to this particular webinar, and I'm going to leave it up for you for a while so that way you have it. And it's your go-to resource when you feel as though things are stagnant, when you're not improving, when you feel as though everything is slowing down, right? I want you to go back to this webinar because this is going to help you. This is going to give you the blueprint. It's going to give you the tools that are necessary in order for you to build muscle. With my 30 years of experience, this is everything that I know condensed into a package. And it's not going to be this scientific thing that's going to confuse you. It's going to be very simple steps that anybody can do with some science in between. But at the same time, it's going to give you a strategy. It's going to get you moving in the right direction. Because here's the thing, in reality, we've got all this information on social media flying at us, right? TikTok, Instagram. And everybody that I know, every strength coach, every hypertrophy coach that I know does things a little different. And there's a reason why you came to Jasmine and I in the first place. You saw something different. And yeah, you might have left us and you've gone on to do other things. But my question is, has your body responded since you left us? If it has, amazing. You no need to watch this. But if things are still not where you want them to be from a muscle building standpoint, this is your resource. This is a tool. This is my free gift to you. So hypertrophy. What is hypertrophy? Hypertrophy basically is muscle building, right? Increasing the size, increasing the volume, increasing the mass, increasing the cross-sectional area of this meat suit that we all carry around. This is Trevor, my anatomy man. And I'm Troy Brown. You already know who I am. I'm the CEO of Apex Physiques and the CEO of Apex Lifestyle Health and Fitness. And I basically teach people how to transform, whether that be muscle building, whether that be even fat loss. And this particular creation is my own idea that came to me a few years ago. I'm responsible also for Governor Training too, which is a high intensity training program. I'm also an IFBB pro, former IFBB pro, and a current British champion, which I honor because I'm very grateful for achieving that title. But this is basically a creation in getting you traction to move in the right direction to build muscle. And you could call it muscle efficiency in a way. So let's get started. If you have pen and paper, I would highly suggest to take some notes here because I'm going to give you everything that I got here on this webinar. If I get animated, I do apologize. I'm just very passionate about what I do. All right, now I want to talk to you about these important variables when it comes to building muscle, creating traction, right? And whenever you're at a loss when it comes to building muscle, come back to this pyramid. Come back to adherence, come back to effort, come back to calories and protein and recovery, sleep and stress, right? This is the main framework of what I'm going to present today. However, there's one other key variable that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's the training variables. I personally believe, and you might say I'm wrong here. So we've all got our own beliefs, right? We got this paradigm of how to build muscle, which has probably been passed on to us from somebody. And what I try and do is go through more anecdotal approaches, but also through science and through the people that I've helped over the last 30 years. This is my belief on how to build muscle. And I always believe that it starts on the gym floor. It's the way you approach your workout. So we're going to do a lot on your training in the gym specifically, but we're also going to touch on all those other variables that I've already mentioned. Now, before we get going here, the foundation of muscle building is adherence and consistency. Without those two variables, you might as well just give up and not even start, okay? And this is probably one of the reasons why you know people or yourself that you may have been sort of one step forward, two steps back, and you've not seen the results or you've not seen the fruits of your labor. Maybe it's because of these two fundamental principles. Significant muscle mass will only occur over a long period of time. And the people that are on TikTok and Instagram, what they tell you is that it can be done very easily. Now, I'm going to tell you through somebody that had decent genetics that it's hard earned. Muscle building is hard earned. And you, my friend, had to create the stimulus in the gym to allow growth production to happen outside of the gym. Lifestyle and training factors need to be in alignment. We all know that nutrition is the core driver to promote hypertrophy. How do we know that? Well, how do you get energy to train? How do you create a muscle contraction? How do you generate ATP, adenosine triphosphate? It's done through the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is a highly, I would say, a highly intelligent, if you will, an intelligent organelle that's responsible for converting fats, protein, and carbs into ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right? So this is why nutrition is a massive variable. Most people on social media that follow a lot of the pro bodybuilders, they believe that it's all steroids. That is the core driver to muscle building. I believe through 30 experience that steroids is only a small part of it. It really helps with recovery. Whereas the core driver to hypertrophy is your training stimulus, and to align with that is your nutrition. Adherence and consistency has to be implemented long term. Failure to do so will bring mediocre results and frustration. We see it all the time, right? People take one step forwards, two steps back. They put the cart before the horse. You need a long-term strategy to be put in place in order to build muscle. So you've got to have a program, which I'll come on to in a second, and I'll talk about the hypertrophy volumes and the reason why maybe results aren't showing up for you, maybe because you're not hitting all three hypertrophy volumes, which I'll come on to later. So we're going to go over effort now. And this is where, being in North America, I just got back from the UK. My father just passed away. I didn't get to train there, unfortunately. But the mentality from where I'm from in the UK for building muscle, we're all about effort, right? Which I think the core driver of that mindset came from Dorian Yates, right? And if you could go down the lineage, you would think about Mike Mentzer and you would think about Arthur Jones, right? And they talk about intensity being a core driver to building muscle. And it is. I think effort is something that a lot of people neglect. In North America, where I live, in Canada, the general consensus and the paradigm of building muscle, you could say, is volume. People do a lot of volume over here, right? They spend a lot of time in the gym. And I'm not trying to judge people because I don't know what their goals are, but I would assume that they're trying to build muscle. And they train long periods in the gym, long durations, and they don't see the fruits of their labor. And I think the reason why is because they turn that volume switch up really high, doing a lot of set volume. And instead, what I think they should be doing is maybe in some programming is to bring down volume and increase effort and intensity. So let's figure out intensity. What is intensity? For me, intensity is where you go into the gym, you lift load, right? You put stress on the muscle, and you use the last set principle as your way of increasing intensity. And this is where a way of logging your training would come into play. So that way, you know that you're increasing the existing capacity. Unfortunately, people are trying to build muscle. What they do, unfortunately, is they stay inside the existing capacity. What I mean by that is they do things that they've already done. In order to grow, in order to build muscle, in order to create growth stimulus in the gym, remember you're tearing down muscle in the gym, is you need to complete tasks that are outside the existing capacity. So effort is right up there of oxygen. It is an important variable for you. Effort, intensity of effort is the core driver of growth stimulus. Remember, I mentioned stimulating growth in the gym. We're not growing in the gym, we're growing when we're outside, right? That's just a simple term that I think most of us forget about. Your mission is to get close to muscular failure. Now, there's a lot of confusion when it comes to failure. I believe that failure is important. You need to train to failure depending on the right movement patterns, which I'll talk about later. If you don't like going to failure, maybe you find it uncomfortable. And let's face it, building muscle is supposed to be uncomfortable. You're doing things that are outside the existing capacity. If you don't go to failure, then the research shows get close to it, okay? But I believe, my opinion is that on your last set, depending on the right movement pattern, which I'll talk about later, you got to hit failure, right? Great way of doing that is doing it on machines or doing it on the peripheral muscle groups like the bicep, triceps, and calves as an example. But I'll touch on this later in more detail. Your volume, I've already mentioned, needs to be cautiously regulated. a training phase will determine your training volume. So do I believe in volume and do I believe in intensity? I believe both work, but you need to do it strategically in a training program. I think most people in North America just keep their set volume cranked all the way, and they don't really see their body changing over years, right? They do the same program week after week, month after month, year after year. So here's a picture of Chris Bumstead. We all know who he is, right? He's probably as famous as Arnold Schwarzenegger. But research through, Brad Schoenfield, Dr. Brad Schoenfield, who's a PhD, he's somebody that I would look at if you're looking to build muscle. Look at some of his material. A lot of it is scientific based, and with science, though, you've got to be careful because you've got to figure out who are the studies being put on. Are they done on experienced practitioners? And what is their lifestyle like when they're doing these scientific studies? So you've got to really understand that who are these people and what are their backgrounds and how long have they been training for? Are they beginners? Are they intermediates? Or are they advanced practitioners? So that's a massive variable when it comes to looking at research. So effects on resistance training performed to failure is a good thing to read. And it talks about going to failure as a good thing. Now, if you look for evidence of not going to failure to build muscle, you'll find that too. So I can only give you what has worked for me and my clients. I believe the way to train with good form and execution is to go to failure. I really believe that, depending on the right muscle group. So the caveat is don't go to failure, though, on the big lifts, like the deadlifts, like the barbell squats, like the bench press, okay? Because you're asking for trouble. If you go to failure on these movement patterns, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when things are going to break down. I see failure as when form starts to break down, right? That's, for me, that's true failure. Get close to failure only on your last set. I've been mentioning that already. Adding more sets to failure is not going to speed up results. And I see that happening a lot with a lot of people, is they see that failure is a core driver of hypertrophy. So they think, well, instead of just doing the one set of failure at the end of my last set, they allow all their sets to go to failure. And that basically means that you're digging the recovery hole deeper and deeper. I love what Dorian Yates talks about. He told me many years ago when I sat with him in 2007 after turning pro, and I sat in Temple Gym in Birmingham, his famous gym that's closed now. And he said to me, think about training as an analogy of using sandpaper and rubbing it on your hand. The more you rub it, right, you create a wound. And if you keep rubbing it, the wound will never heal. And this is what most people do in North America, is that they're always training and they're digging their recovery hole deeper and deeper. And they may only get 1 day of rest a week. They train 6 days straight. So they might say, well, I'm training a split routine, so I'm allowing my muscles to heal. But you're remembering one key variable here. The nervous system is the chief governor. It controls everything. So your nervous system, your muscles may have recovered, but your nervous system may not have recovered. What does your form look like? So before you can quantify a movement and go heavier, you first have to qualify. So before you can quantify, you first have to qualify. So what do the reps look like? This is massive. Form and execution, like consistency and adherence, is right up there with oxygen. It truly, truly is. And I see where a lot of people come to us, to Jasmine and I, and one thing they never do is we never get to see their form and execution. I love it, for me as a coach, when people send me videos. We got clients all over the world, and when they send me videos, they're open to being critiqued. They're open to wanting to get better, because a coach could potentially see something that they don't. And that's why I look and I really look at and study people's form. And I think it's just a habit that I've generated as a personal trainer. So effort, going to failure is a good idea depending on the right movement patterns, but don't do it on the deadlift. Don't do it on squats. Don't do it on the bench press. Do it on movements that are safer. Do it on maybe machines. Do it on pec flies, lateral raises, bicep curls, tricep push downs. Things of that nature will allow you to safely go to failure. Okay, let's move on. Now we're going to talk about calories and protein, right? Another important variable that what I see again on social media is people want to be ripped and shredded year round, and they train in a fasted state. which again, we all know is not good for our bodies, right? We're burning through glycogen. They think that because of what they ate the day before will pull them through, and that's why they can train faster in the morning. I did that for actually when I retired. I actually got sick and tired of eating food because I ate 8 meals a day. I was eating 7,000 to 8,000 calories a day. So when I retired, I started doing fasting. And what I realized was I was just burning through glycogen very, very quickly. And number two is I couldn't get a good training pump. So you need to make sure that you're eating food for performance in the gym. So let's talk about calories and protein and why it's important for you to build muscle. So muscle building efficiency, protein, calories provide the building blocks. They truly do. If you're not getting sufficient amount of calories or protein, let's talk about protein really quickly. So let's say arbitrary, you are 200 pounds. You should be eating as a baseline 200 grams of protein a day if you're looking to build muscle. As you start to become experienced, then you can increase that. Maybe you can go to 1.2 per pound body weight or 1.5 per pound body weight. But the point is, every single day, you need to be eating a robust amount of protein. So your protein should be coming from all different sources. If you keep eating chicken breast 5 times a day, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you develop a food intolerance to that meal. So it's very important to get your protein from all different sources. So that way you create a different amino acid profile that goes into your body. So mix it up. So go with eggs, go with turkey, go with chicken, go with red meat, go with fish, go with protein powders, go with casein protein as an example. Mix them up. Try some cottage cheese if you like it. Point is, keep your protein mixed, okay? That's another key variable that I haven't written down here. Now, failure not to eat to have efficient amount of calories and protein, failure not to do so will basically mean that you won't build muscle, right? Now, I will touch on something very quickly here, is that you could be getting the right amount of protein on a consistent basis, the right amount, but are you absorbing that protein? So that's another thing I'll touch on later, which is important. So protein and calories are the raw materials to be sufficient muscle over time. We know that, right? But are we doing it? You know, we all know what we should be doing. Are we in the habit of doing it? So side note, having your body fat as low, having low digits of, let's say 10% as an example, which most men love to do, is not optimal for building muscle. Also, I mentioned already, people training in a fasted state. You definitely, and here's, I know this because I did it personally. So I got my own ideas when it comes to fasting and trying to train. If you're training in a fasted state, you're not going to build muscle. And you might argue with me. And if you do, please let me know and give me your reasons why you can build muscle in a fasted state. Personally, I've tried it. I've had other clients try it. You need sodium, which is a core driver for muscle contraction. You need protein, you need calories to convert into ATP, right? Which is from the mitochondria, which I've already mentioned. So ATP is the core driver for muscle contraction. Actually, you need ATP and calcium in order to create a muscle contraction. Where does the muscle contraction come from? It starts from the motor cortex, then transitions to the spinal cord, then to the muscle. So nutrition is a core driver of hypertrophy, okay? But training in a fasted state will not serve you. And I really want to hit that home. So if you got anything from this webinar today, stop training fasted. You need nutrition for performance in the gym. Calories. Now, calories in, we're talking about already, we've mentioned it, eating in a calorie deficit won't build muscle. It won't build muscle. So we need to stop doing that ASAP. So you might say, well, I don't really know how many calories I should be eating. Well, I would, if I were in your shoes, if you're looking to build muscle and you're serious, find out how many calories that you need. It's a simple process. You can just go on Google and do that. Calorie maintenance, you know, so basically what I talk about with maintenance is meaning that what your body needs at rest. And some people are basically staying in this range of calories per day. And I believe, again, that won't serve you if you're looking to build muscle. In order to build muscle, we need this third principle, which is eating in a calorie surplus. That's where you're most optimal. You need nutrients in order to grow. But a lot of men that I've seen and I speak to that reach out to me for help want abs and six-pack year round. They want to be shredded. And in order to build muscle, you need a little bit of fluid. You need that extra little bit of body fat to help with the joints. It allows you to lift a little bit heavier. You know, when you're shredded and ripped, you may find that you won't be as strong. You're less in body weight, and you don't have that support around the connective tissue that you need in order to lift heavier loads to challenge and create growth stimulus. So eating a calorie surplus is a must. You have to do it. I don't know any other way. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Now, nutrition factors to consider. Now, I was mentioning earlier about absorption, right? Now, I'll touch on that in a second here, but meal timing is important. Being a pro bodybuilder for many years, you might say, well, you were an enhanced. Yes, I was, but let's touch on that just very briefly here. Enhancement of PEDs, really the drop, how I look at it is it really helped with recovery. But the key to my success as a pro bodybuilder, somebody that had okay genetics, was my nutrition. I took it very, very seriously. So my meal timing was done every 2 to 3 hours. The second principle is the repetition of protein and quality protein. So if you're able to afford good amounts of wholesome, organic, grass-fed meat, as an example, that might be a good idea. There's a company that Jasmine and I work with. They're called trulocal out here in Canada. Go check them out. It's a phenomenal service. They work with local farmers and they bring great meat to the front of your door. It's an amazing service, trulocal. The repetition of quality protein is important. So you should be feeding your body with protein, generally speaking, over 2 to 3, latest minimum would be 4 hours, every 4 to 3 to 2 hours, ideally. Now, this one in the middle here is something that, if you don't get anything, I want you to get this part. And it's so basic and it's so simple, but so misunderstood. And that's chewing your food. Remember, I mentioned earlier, it's not what you eat, it's what your body absorbs. I had a friend of mine, good friend of mine, who was with me all throughout my career. His name's Phil. And I'm going to bring, he probably doesn't know I'm talking about him here, but Mr. Phil Wolf, what he used to do when we would eat in my bodybuilding career, he would literally look at his food and within a minute, it was gone. He literally wouldn't even chew it. It looked as though he didn't even chew it, but the point is that he always had stomach issues. And I truly believe that he didn't spend enough time chewing his food. So when you're chewing your food, the goal is to liquidize it. Unfortunately, what I see a lot of people that I work with, they're very busy. They're in their own business. They're entrepreneurs. So they eat very quick and they slam a lot of protein shakes. So your body needs wholesome food, basically, what I'm trying to say. And they need to allocate time to sit down and to not be distracted and to eat their meals. If you understand about your gut being the second brain, your gut has to be in a calm situation. If you're stressed out and you've got this sympathetic drive all day, your body's going to deal with that first, as opposed to digesting that food. So this is why I talk about parasympathetic is very important when it comes to eating food. You need to calm yourself down. You need to stop the distractions of looking at your phone while you're eating and focus on how your body is digesting that food. Otherwise, you become oblivious to the nutrition, to the absorption of the food, and then you can keep eating because you're not paying attention to your digestion. So chewing your food, guys, is essential for muscle building, allowing those nutrients to be partitioned properly. And that way you can feed the muscle after you've created all that stress in the gym. Okay. So avoid distractions when eating and make sure, something that I never did in my off seasons is I never ate enough fiber. I didn't eat enough macronutrients. I didn't eat enough vegetables. I was so focused on getting my carbs and protein and fat that I didn't allow any room for my macronutrients. So if I could go back and turn the clock back, I would have eaten every single meal and I would have had vegetables with every single meal, 100%. I do that now though. Obviously it's too late because I retired. All right, let's move on. So I hope that's hit home. I hope you understand the importance of that. So we've obviously spoken about training variables, and I want to talk about it again because training variables, this is the meat now of what I'm about to give you. This is my way of giving back. Okay, this is what I believe is going to set the benchmark. When you do everything right in the gym and you don't cut steps and cut corners, it's going to translate and trickle into other areas of your life, like your nutrition and your stress management, as an example. So you're leaving no stone unturned. You're dotting all I's and crossing all T's on the gym floor. So let's go into this in more detail. All right, here we go. This is massive. Training manipulation. So let's talk about exercise selection, right? So your structure will determine the way you function in the gym. What I mean by that, you might be a younger guy in your 20s, maybe in your 30s. And right now, your body basically can lift decent loads. It can use a lot of free weight lifts and be okay with that. But as you start to get into your late 30s and 40s, you start to realize that those exercises that you used to do very well at in your 20s and early 30s don't fit your structure anymore. So structure determines function. So you've got to pick your movements wisely. When I work with somebody in the gym, I look at, does that movement effectively hit their frame right? And if it doesn't, we need to get rid of it. I have one guy in particular, he's 6'2". He wants to gain muscle, but he does a lot of, he squats first of all, he back squats. And I'll go over back squats with him and it just doesn't look right. And we've done everything. We've even tried to open up his calves. We tried to stretch his soleuses out, do some myofascial release techniques so he can get that depth. But it just doesn't fit right. I think because he's got very, very long levers. He's got a long femur and he's got a very long torso. So when he goes under the bar and he goes down eccentrically, he has this massive forward lean. So what we've done is we've got rid of barbell squats and we've got him on the Smith machine. And that fits him so much better, the Smith machine and also the hack squats. So your structure determines function. Training frequency, I mentioned this already. Research states to get close to failure. But also, if you're training too frequently, meaning you are training 6 days a week, all right, with high volume, that will, and if you're looking for progressive overload, right? And let's say you're monitoring your loads and you're trying to go a little heavier or you're trying to increase reps or what have you, that will affect recovery ability 100%. All right. Now you might say, well, I'm on a cycle right now and I'm using PEDs. Doesn't matter. So you got to look at your training, get a bird's eye view and think to yourself, am I overtraining? I had one guy, I'll give you an example. He came to me. When I first saw him, he looked very stringy. He's in good shape, but his muscles were very stringy. They didn't have any volume to them, like fullness. And I asked him, how many days are you training? And he's been training for 3 years up until that point. And he was doing 6 to 7 days of training a week. And I believe that's the reason why he was stringy. And then we realized when we went over his nutrition that he was under eating. So it wasn't till we started feeding his muscles, and we reduced his training from 6 to 7 days a week. And we brought him down to 4 to 3. And the guy has put on, and this is me not blowing smoke, and I'm not lying to you, the guy has gained in almost a year. He's put on 35 pounds. Sure, he's got some water weight on there, but his muscles now are a lot more fuller and they're a lot more apparent now because he's feeding his body and he's training harder in the gym, but he's using more recovery days and the guy's growing exponentially. Rest times. So if you're looking at compound movements, bench press, deadlifts, bent over rows, T-bar rows, front squats, barbell squats, bench presses, all the big boys, right? You're looking at and this is scientifically proven now, the research is showing, if you look at some of Dr. Brad Schoenfield's work, he talks about 2 to 3 minutes ideally for compound lifts. And I think he's right, 100%. And then for isolation movements like the peripheral muscle groups, like the biceps and triceps and calves, you can reduce that. You can go down to 1 to 2 minutes. So that's important too. Execution and technique, I mentioned, is right there of oxygen. I see it all the time with people in the gym, and maybe they just don't know. And I think this is where you need to seek a mentor to help with execution, because if your movement patterns are off and you're not performing those movements safely and correctly with good form and execution, or more importantly, you're not challenging the muscle, it's a waste of time. So this goes back to the standardization of the stimulus. It goes back to what the reps look like. It goes back to before you can quantify an exercise, you first have to qualify an exercise. And if you understand that principle, you would understand that your execution needs to be looked at. And if I were in your shoes, I always believe the phone, our cell phones, is a blessing and a curse. And what I mean by that is when you're in the gym, you should put it on airplane mode. That way you're not distracted with social media or emails. But use your phone as a way of looking at your technique. So, for example, if you're doing a barbell squat, why not look at your form from a side-on angle and become your own investigator? You're like the form police, if you will. That's what I do when clients send me videos of their training. I look at how they can do it better. You know, so you can do an exercise well, but wouldn't you want to do it better? Right. So execution is very important. So you're looking at controlled reps, you're looking at eccentrics. Again, they've done a lot of research on eccentric training, or eccentric overload training is another core driver for hypertrophy. So generally speaking, your eccentrics need to be, for me anyway, I look at 2 and 3 seconds of control on the eccentrics. And what you've got to remember about eccentrics, muscle is being contracted while it's lengthening, or muscles being lengthened while it's contracting, right? And if you understand about the myofibral, right? Myofibral training is between 6 and 10 reps, and it's more sarcomeres, which is the smallest unit of contraction, in series, right? In series means eccentric. In parallel means concentric, okay? So, and then you want to be lifting loads in reasonably strict fashion. Volume, I've hit this home, right? Hopefully you get this by now. So your volume has to be cautiously regulated. If research states to get close to failure, then in my humble opinion, volume needs to be cautiously regulated, okay? Training duration, up to 60 minutes. One lady we were working with that really wants to build muscle, she was in the gym up to 3 hours, 5 days a week. So what we did is we immediately went in there, revamped her training, make sure that she was hitting all 3 hypertrophy volumes, which I'll talk about in a second here. And we also pulled her training down to 60 minutes, and she's starting to respond. Now, the thing about women can handle way more training stress than men. So, and the reason why you only want to be training up to 60 minutes is because we have limited chemical reserves. We have limited biochemical reserves in our body. So depending on age is also a determined factor too. For me and Jasmine, we're in our 40s, right? So now we're training probably anywhere between 45 to 60 minutes. And once we hit that time frame, we get out. Even if we've got more movements to do, we'll stop. Maybe in our 20s, we could maybe go a little bit longer, but our recovery ability now is sort of a lot slower than it used to be because we're both in our 40s. So now you might need a warm-up principle, you might need some training here or some pre-warm-up exercises to help with asymmetries and imbalances. So you could do that 10, 15 minutes before if you do have some joint discrepancies, and then allow your training on the gym floor to be no longer than 60 minutes, ideally, okay? So let's move on now. This is another important variable. Training is my passion. I absolutely love it. I'm fascinated by it. And when it comes to hypertrophy, increasing the volume, increasing the size, increasing the mass, increasing the cross-sectional area of a muscle, we have to look at, are we hitting all hypertrophy volumes, right? And we look at 3 things. We look at mechanical tension, number 1. Number 2, we look at metabolic stress. Number 3, we look at muscle damage, right? And then we also look at other 3 variables of hypertrophy. We've got myofibrillar hypertrophy, which I've already touched on, which is basically where you're training between 6 to 12 rep range, using about 60, maybe to 85% of your 1 RM, right? And then you've got connective tissue hypertrophy. And connective tissue is important to talk about, right? So we're talking about the epimyosin, the endomyosin, perimyosin. We're talking about the basal lamina, right, of connective tissue. And 20% of connective tissue is in our muscles, 20%. 70% is myofibral, which we've already touched on, but 20% is connective tissue. And the thing about connective tissue is dynamic, and it can grow, and it can contribute to strength. So we need a program that also hits connective tissue. Unfortunately, most of the programs that you see online are only tapping into myofibral, which is 70% of our muscles, right? So we've got myofibrillar hypertrophy, and then we've got connective tissue hypertrophy. And I want to touch on the last one, number 3. and that is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is a fancy term for higher rep ranges. Now, when you're doing sarcoplasmic training, which I call sometimes accumulation training, you are going up to higher rep ranges of 15 to 20 to 30, even sometimes up to 40 reps. Now, you might say that's way too high. There's a time and a place for sarcoplasmic training. You wouldn't do it all the time. I look at training, for me, when I program for clients that are looking to build muscle specifically, is their training is like a wave. So they have myofibrillar, then they'll have connective tissue, then they'll have sarcoplasmic, then they'll have a deload, okay, to allow adaptation to happen. And then they'll have myofibrillar, then they'll have sarcoplasmic, then they'll do a little bit of connective tissue. So there's always this wave. It's never linear. It's never this one process. It's never myofibrillar all the way through. The rep ranges change, and also the 1 rep maximum change. And obviously, you don't want to be doing 1 rep maxes in hypertrophy training, right? Because that only stimulates one pathway, which is the phosphate creatine pathway, and that only lasts for 3 seconds. So this is why when you go into 6 to 12, you start to use glycolysis, right? You start to use glucose for energy, and you need to be training the myofibrillar because that's 70% of muscle, but you need to also be training the connective tissue, and also you need to be training the sarcoplasmic, which, by the way, 10% of skeletal muscle is mitochondrial proteins. Okay, so we're talking about the fluid, we're talking about the mitochondria, we're talking about the T tubules, we're talking about the sarcoplasmic reticulum where calcium is released. Okay, we're talking about things like metabolites like mTOR, MAP kinase, calcium signaling pathways. There's thousands of metabolites. Most people in the bodybuilding world and the muscle building world believe that myofibrillar is the only way to go, right? Basically, myofibrillar is the sarcomeres in series or the sarcomere in parallel, right? That's just one way of hypertrophy. Now, what they're showing through the research, if you do your research, there's other hypertrophies, right? Sarcoplasmic and connective tissue hypertrophy. So when we look at scheduling a program, what I look at, if the goal is to build muscle, and it could change, but this is just a general overview. The first 4 weeks could be in high intensity, right? Which would be low volume, increase intensity, which I did all through my career. If what I know now, I would have undulated it, which I'm talking about. And then weeks 4 to 6, I would do higher volume. So I start maybe using a little bit of accumulation, maybe use 6 to 12 rep range, using about 60, maybe to 85%, of their 1 RM. And then the next phase, maybe going to sarcoplasmic, where I start going up to 15 reps or start going up even higher. I might start encompassing some drop sets here. I might start encompassing some eccentrics or some force negatives or some what they call it. There's another one too that I did some research on very recently. Loaded stretch positions, which is another great tool to use to build muscle. Okay, muscle rounds, FST7. FST7, which is what I was mentioning earlier with Mr. Chris Bumstead. That's what he does. Now, most people don't know what FST7 is and they can't explain it. Now I know what it is, and why I think it's a good strategy to use, because it tackles all of the hypertrophy volumes that I'm talking about. And then the last phase would be a deload. So my question to you, my friend, when was the last time you did a deload? When was the last time you actually reduced your volume to half and you reduced your loads to half, and you just went in the gym and just pulled everything down so the body can get back into this little bit more parasympathetic, and you can give the nervous system a bit of a break from all the stress of heavy loads and training at 6 to 12 with heavy weight and challenging the myofibrillar and not allowing recovery to happen. Actually, let me ask you another question. If you ever done a deload, when was the last time, and you're probably going to shut this down now, when was the last time you actually took a week off from training? You know, I can remember like it was yesterday, after a hard off season of training, I would take every 12 weeks, I would take a week off. I learned that from Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia. So I'm trying to plant a new idea in your mind, all right? Hopefully you're keeping your mind still at this point wide open, right? Okay, we're coming towards the end now. I want to talk about recovery, right? Again, recovery is a massive core driver of hypertrophy. You're not, when you're building muscle, you're putting stress on the in the gym, right? You are stressing the muscle, you're tearing tissue down, right? You're challenging the myofibril, you're challenging the sarcoplasmic, you're challenging the sarcomere, which is the smallest unit of muscle contraction, right? Which is actin and myosin. There's more, but actin and myosin creates muscle contraction, right? We've already spoken about why we should be looking at an undulating program. But if you're not recovering from training, and how you know if you're not recovering, here's what you look for. What's your sex drive like? Are you waking up in the morning with a baby's arm holding an apple? What I mean by that, do you have an erection in the morning? What's your libido like? Do you have a good sex drive? What's your appetite like? Do you have an appetite? If you don't have an appetite, that could be that you're not recovering. It could mean also that you're overtraining. What is your general energy like in the gym? Are you tired a lot? Another thing to look at, what's your stress levels like outside of the gym? Is your job, as an example, and I work with a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they're under a lot of high stress. So I have to look at staying away from 6 days of training and maybe doing 3 to 4 and looking at the recovery as a core driver. Are you getting outside? Are you grounding yourself? Are you doing some type of breath work? Are you doing contrast showers? Are you maybe getting a massage once a month? Are you looking at mobility and stretching as a way of decompressing after a hard day of training and a hard day of work? So all these things are very important for recovery. And I'm going to touch on this in a little bit more detail because I really think it's important. So if we're looking at recovery factors to consider, I mentioned deep tissue is a great idea to do if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, then buying a lacrosse ball. Well, I'm in Canada, right? So you'd go to Canadian Tire and buy a $12 or an $8 for a lacrosse ball. And at the end of the night, while the missus is watching 90 Day Fiance, you can lie on the ground and you can put the ball in tight hot spots in the body and you can massage yourself. A great idea, by the way. Cold shower, contrast showers. Now, there is some research showing that you shouldn't be doing cold therapy after training. And I agree because it blunts inflammation, right? We need inflammation in order to grow and to repair, which is a good thing. So cold therapy would be done maybe the next day. So what I do, if I train today, I'm going to do legs today. Tomorrow, when I wake up in the morning, God willing, I will have a cold shower. So I'll do hot, clean all my private bits, and then go under the cold. And I'll end on cold. Another great thing to do, if you have that luxury, is an infrared sauna, right? It helps with mitochondria production too, allows to help with recovery. An infrared sauna is even better, all right? There's many health benefits for an infrared sauna. I've also looked at Jasmine and I at some point, when we're able to, we want to get an infrared, some infrared therapy. They do many ways of doing it. You can put it on your door and you can get some infrared therapy done as well, which is great for recovery too. It might actually be a great way to speed up the recovery process if you're training really hard and if you're under a lot of stress outside the gym. All right, as I mentioned here, if you don't see the value of deep tissue massage, invest in the lacrosse ball, and that way you can be your own massage expert and then put the ball in tight areas of your physique. Where I know a lot of guys I work with that are maybe desk bound get really tight pec minor, pec major. They get super tight because they're always on the desk and their shoulders are coming forward. They're protracted, which means their pecs are fully shortened, and then their rhomboids at the back become fully lengthened, and then they start to get this burning sensation around the scapula, underneath the scapula. So it's a good idea to maybe at night, after a hard day's training and a hard day's work, just lie on that lacrosse ball and find those tight trigger spots, okay? Sometimes a lot of guys get really tight lats. I think lats are a problem. They get super tight. And I think the reason why is we spend the majority of our time with our hands by our sides, right? Our hands aren't generally up above our heads. So I love to get our clients, Jasmine and I, we love to get our clients doing dead hangs. Because it helps with shoulder health and it also helps to open up the lats, right? The latissimus dorsi. If you look at the latissimus dorsi attachment, I look at it as 3 heads, right? So you've got the iliac lat, you got the mid fibers, the thoracic fibers, right? Or you call the mid fibers, and you got the thoracic lat fibers. So we would need a strategy to stretch those areas out. And then obviously you look at, you're looking at lower traps, you're looking at rhomboids, upper traps, mid traps, you're looking at teres major, teres minor. So if you do spend a lot of time at a desk, you would need a good mobility program to help cater for those areas, those muscles that I mentioned. So that's again something that I can also help you with as well. All right. So now again, talking about recovery factors for efficiency of muscle or mass muscle efficiency, just avoid cold therapy post-workout, right? So don't do any cold showers, don't do any ice baths post-workout. Just do it the next day, okay? Meditation. I haven't really touched on that. I think this is important if you're looking to get yourself grounded due to the stress of life. We have things flying at us from all areas, right? We've got information overload, right? We're working harder than ever before. We're doing long days, and then we've got training on top of that. And then we could be under eating, or we're eating too much, or we're, not sitting down. We're just rushing our food, and we end up with stomach problems, and it's a cascade of problems when you are under a high stress. And it could be that you may need a deload, or you may need just to look at doing some daily meditation, maybe just 5-minute meditation. And meditation doesn't mean that you're just sitting down in a Zen state under a lotus tree and you think that you're all enlightened. Meditation could just mean that you're going outside and you're just going to be in nature and you're just going to go for a walk. All right. That's a great way to add some parasympathetic in your life. Most of us in North America are on the opposite side, which is the sympathetic side, which is sympathetic dominance daily, just high stress. So the way I look at it, you and me should be, in an ideal world, living like a Buddhist monk. 80% of our life should be serene and calm. Most of the time, we should be living like a Buddhist monk. And then the 20% is where we create that sympathetic dominance in the gym. All right. Breath work is also another beneficial thing too. I follow a guy on YouTube, Breath Beats, I believe it's called. Check him out. His name's Dan. He's got some phenomenal breath work, and he goes through guided breath work techniques. Really help you also with recovery too, and keeping you centered and grounded to keep away that sympathetic stress outside of the gym. So that way you can keep growing, and keep building tissue. Last thing we're going to talk about is sleep and stress. So remember at the start of this webinar, I was talking about this will be your blueprint. This is going to be your framework to keep building muscle. When things slow down, when life gets in the way or stress is very apparent, you can always go back to this webinar. You can always go back to this recording, and it's going to help and serve you to keep things moving in the right direction of your muscle building endeavors. So I believe right at the top of the pyramid, sleep and stress is another thing that is sort of swept under the carpet. No one really talks about it. And it's a massive variable when it comes to building this meat suit, right? Building muscle, building strength, even somewhat losing body fat too. Do you ever find when people are in a constant sympathetic drive state, it's very hard for them to get lean? I can remember when I did the Ironman Pro in 2009, and I was making my American debut as a pro. And I went into that show under the most stress I've ever had in my life. And I was the biggest I've ever been, but I looked like shit, basically. And it was because the stress levels were just so too high. And it wasn't till about a week after the show that I looked absolutely phenomenal, but it was too late. It's all about timing when you're getting ready for a bodybuilding show. All right. So sleep and stress management. If you're having a hard time sleeping, which most men are in North America and women, they're having a tough time sleeping. One thing that Jasmine does brilliantly is she gives our clients phenomenal sleep hygiene protocols to do. And once we see them implementing the protocol, we see their body transform. We see their resting heart rate come down. We see heart rate variability improve. All of these markers that we look at bi-weekly when we get our bi-weekly check-ins from our clients, we look at all of these things. We look at, is things moving in the right direction, and things aren't working and we need to make some changes. So if you're having a hard time sleeping and you live in a constant state of stress, how is your muscle building endeavors? Are you actually building muscle? My opinion, if you've got such high stress in your life, you won't grow. I'm just being brutally honest, and that's me being completely open and transparent. Sleep, this has to be seriously looked at. you got to look at sleep, because if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, right? And if you're not sleeping, you're not allowing Mother Nature to do her part, right? So if you look at a wound, you cut your hand as an example, how does the wound heal? You don't heal it, Mother Nature heals it. And the way we do that is through recovery and is getting a good night's sleep. So if you're not growing, another area to seriously look at is to look at maybe investing, if you can afford to, invest in the Aura Ring, or buy or download some of those apps that you would use some type of heart rate monitor, and you would use it around your sternum, and it would track. Some of these apps will allow you to track how you slept through the night, and it will even tell you if you're able to train. It will tell you if your body's in the sympathetic drive, or if your resting heart rate's high, or your heart rate variability is not good. It will tell you that maybe today isn't a good day to train. So that's a good thing to look at. Sometimes it's not always about constantly training. It's looking at heart rate variabilities, looking about your recovery markers and seeing on your phone, on the apps, or looking at your Aura Ring, are you recovering from your training? This is a massive variable. I believe in the next 2 to 3 years, this is where the fitness industry, the muscle building industry is going to be going. It's already happening. Okay. So stress, decrease emotional stress by using holistic lifestyle approaches. I've already showed them to you already. This will run alongside your muscle building regime. It truly will. So utilize sleep, utilize stress management. Another client we had, we're actually still working with him. He's a chef, and under a lot of stress, works very long days, like 16, 15-hour days, and training again 5 to 6 days a week. So we pulled his training down, got a good sleep hygiene going, got him checking his heart rate variability in the morning, looking at the numbers and bringing down his sympathetic dominance. And we start to see him build muscle. We're starting to see the stress lower and his heart rate variability in the morning, and his resting heart rate's improving. And what we look at, if someone comes to us and their heart rate, their resting heart rate or their morning resting heart rate is over 70, then we need to address that ASAP. High stress, lack of sleep, right? I've already mentioned that. It's going to affect your cognitive functioning. It's going to affect your brain function. It's going to affect the way you make decisions. It's going to affect your energy in the gym. I had a lady last week actually come in to see me, and she wants to build tissue, but she eats in the fastest state. So she's trained in the fastest state, sorry, which means more stress on the body, right? I told her the importance of having a good pre-workout meal and then fueling your body about 40 minutes after your training session. Unfortunately, what most people do is they'll slam a shake right after a hard workout. Your body's dealing with all that stress that you created in the gym. So my opinion, what I believe you should do is give it about 40 minutes, let your body calm down, maybe even in fact do some stretching or do some child's pose, breath work, box breathing, post-workout to bring your body back into balance, to bring the body back into the parasympathetic, other side of the sympathetic drive, right? So that's why doing some stretching, doing some breath work is a really good idea to do post-workout after a hard session. You just don't want to leave the gym and then slam a shake. Your body has to deal with all that stress you just put under it. So give it a bit of time. Once you train, give it about 30 to 40 minutes, okay? When you're stressed and you're not sleeping, it's going to lower your adherence. Your cravings are going to go through the roof. You want to eat shit food, right? And that's to do with what's those hormones again? It's to do with ghrelin. I pronounce it ghrelin, and yeah. So you basically have to be very cognizant of your sleep and your stress. So it's going to lower adherence. It's going to lower your consistency if you're working with a coach. And you're not going to want to eat clean food. You're going to your brain's going to crave junk food because you're not giving the rest, you're not giving it the recovery it needs. And then what happens is you get this theory in your head that if you're not training, you're losing muscle. So you create more stress and keep training. In fact, I had another guy that was actually obsessed with training and going to the gym. Most people have this obsessive behavior, and once you deal with one obsessive behavior, it leads into another thing, right? That could be somewhat addiction. So a lot of people are addicted to training, and that's a problem. I went through phases in my life where I was addicted to training. So in the beginning, I was, and I believed that I was training twice a day, 6 days a week, and I never grew a pound. I was actually losing weight. So that's a problem too. If you keep training in a high stress environment and your mood is being affected, low libido, you've got no appetite, or your body's craving junk food all the time and you can't make decisions, maybe your brain fogged, whatever it is, you just have that lackluster feeling, that you have that, you just don't have any zest in the gym. You can't push. You're overtraining. You got to step back, shut it down, do a deload, or take a week off. I tell you, that would be one massive thing that will help you immensely and allow you to start fresh. And then mentally, not just physically, but mentally, you'll feel as though you can really go hard again. I remember speaking to Ronnie Coleman once, 8-time Mr. Olympia, and he would tell me when he was, I mean, he did a lot of volume, right? I mean, he's a genetic freak, obviously, but he would do a week off every 12 weeks, similar to what I used to do. And after every show that he did, he would also take a month off training, a full month off, just to allow his mind and body and nervous system and connective tissue to rest and repair and grow. Makes sense. It's common sense, but common sense is not always common, is it? All right, we're almost done here. So I believe that is basically it. That is all I really wanted to go over. There is some secondary factors which I will touch on very, very quickly. I will touch on supplements. Now, when I started really getting serious about building muscle back in the mid-90s, I used to basically live on protein supplements. I would take 3 or 4 protein shakes a day. And that was because what I was reading, right, in the magazines. I was exposed to all these pro bodybuilders, and they would say, take this supplement, and then if you drink this shake, you will achieve this. And I would have mass gainers. Basically, it was just an easy way out. Your body's going to respond way better to whole foods, right, provided that you're focusing on digestion and focusing on gut health. But supplements are there only to supplement your diet, right? So when Jasmine and I work with people that are serious about physique development, we just keep the stables. And I want you to really think about this today. All these supplements that you take, is it really necessary? And you could actually save some money. So what I look at personally is the basics, right? The foundation, creatine, omega-3s, good whey isolate, grass-fed, third-party tested supplement, maybe a good magnesium supplement. That would be it. It's very, very simple. We don't complicate things. I think over time we can start looking at other factors and looking at adaptogens, maybe potentially, depending on the client's stress. But in the beginning, keep it simple, keep it very, very basic. Most people spend more money on supplements than they do on food. It should be the reverse. If you're trying to build muscle, right, we've got to look at real food that needs to go into our bodies, right? Looking at obviously a sufficient amount of water going in on a daily basis. So supplements, be very careful. If you do use supplements, just make sure that they're good products, they're third-party tested. Reach out to Jasmine. She spends hours. She spent thousands of hours researching supplements. So for me, I don't really have time to really go down that rabbit hole. So I go to an expert, and Jasmine takes care of all that for me. But currently, personally, if you want to know what I take, I'm 46 right now. I take whey isolate, grass-fed, third-party tested protein supplement. I usually do 1 shake a day. Omega-3s, obviously. Brain health. I do my creatine, which is, again, cognitive functioning, also to help with lean muscle, as we all know. It's the most researched supplement on the planet. And then a good magnesium product too. I might now and again take some adaptogens if I'm under a high stress, but that is it. Really, really simple. I think too many of us spend way too much money on supplements when we just need the stables. Okay, creating traction, gone over supplements. I think I'm done. Yep. So that's it, really. I hope this webinar, I hope I've given you some food for thought. I hope I've got the wheels turning in your head. I hope I've created some value for you in order to how to build muscle. I want this to be your framework, your blueprint to allow you to effectively start building muscle safely and correctly, and understand that it's not done overnight. There's a process. But I really want you to take home the importance of adherence and consistency, and also the training variables that I talked about, and more importantly, the recovery and the sleep and the stress. So when you feel things are slowed down, when you feel things are somewhat stagnant in your muscle building endeavors, come back to this webinar, come back to this recording. It will serve you. I spent hours putting this together, and I really believe it will serve you. It will help to move the needle forward in your muscle building endeavors. This is Coach Troy Brown signing off, IBB Pro, apexphysiques.ca, Apex Lifestyle Health and Fitness, where we teach people physique development. We teach people how to transform we teach people how to transform their bodies. We do it through behavior strategies. We understand that most of us have bad habits, right? But what we do, Jasmine and I, is we go in there and we teach people that there's two ways you can change. Number one, through emotional impact, meaning something traumatic has to happen in order for you to change. Number two, through forced repetition. So if you do something over and over again, eventually your nervous system is going to pick it up. So that's it, really. Let me know if you've got any value. If you are looking to go to next levels in your physique transformation, if you're serious and you have a desire for change, send me an email to troybrownmsi@gmail.com. Troy Brown MSI, M for mother, S for sugar, I for ice, @gmail.com. And I will reach out to you. And you might only need training. I can help you with that. Or you might need a combination of both. Maybe you need maybe you would need all of these principles that I put together in order to start moving that needle forward in your muscle building endeavors. Have a good day. I hope this has served you. I hope I've given you some value today. And I hope I've given you some tools that you can start using right here, right now, to allow you to start moving in the right direction of your muscle building endeavors. Coach Troy Brown signing off. Take care.